Welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join me. It is evening here in the eastern part of the United States, where I'm joining from. Again, my name is Mike Peck. I am a director of technology and innovative learning for a K-12 public school district in the state of Pennsylvania. And I also have had the wonderful opportunity to work alongside Kim and Vridi and many others in building Ed3 DAO. And so it's my pleasure to join you all this evening and to share a little bit about AI, and in particular in the context of rethinking how we handle assessment. Again, just a little bit about me. Already shared some of those key points. I am a classroom educator, so while I do work as a director of technology and kind of oversee everything that plugs into a wall, things that oftentimes don't have to do with teaching and learning, I still have a lot of experience in the classroom, which I draw on both my work in the school and also at Ed3 DAO. Because in the classroom is where the learning is happening most often. And so it's important that if we're working to support teachers, that we think about the problems that they face in their classrooms. And so, you can stay connected with me through Ed3 DAO. You can also connect with me directly on LinkedIn, where Michael Peck, EDD, and on Twitter, I'm at EdTech Peck, where you'll find my very random and oftentimes elusive musings on all things technology and education. So you can connect with me there if you'd like. Today's agenda, in thinking about this particular topic, one of the things that I wanted to do is sort of frame this in a way that hopefully will provide kind of a framework for thinking about how do we look at assessment in the era of AI. And I looked at it in 3 phases. We got to rethink, reshape, and leverage. And so tonight we're going to talk about rethinking AI. So what is AI? Why is it significant to assessment? I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of talking about every bit and bob with ChatGPT, and all the other types of chatbots that are out there. We'll talk briefly about them. But what I really want to dive into, since most of you are joining us are probably familiar with those tools, is how are those things reshaping assessment landscape for schools and for teachers? And so we'll talk a little bit about how we might adapt to this new reality. Now, it is still fairly new that these chatbots become universally available for everybody. We're talking about a year, maybe a year and a half if you were on ChatGPT pretty early. But we really don't have a clear path forward, and that's okay. But it's important that we start talking about frameworks or ways of thinking about how do we adapt to this new reality. And the last thing I want to leave you with today is the opportunity to leverage. We're going to look at ways that we can actually take this technology and change your assessment today. And so I want to leave you with some examples, some things that I've worked with my teaching staff and others in using AI to help kind of ramp up or enhance our assessment, especially given the impacts and the capabilities of this new technology. So that's our agenda for today. If I do peek over to my right or your left, I'm not sure which way it'll appear on the camera. I'm just checking the chat if there are any kind of questions that do pop up. Feel free to drop them in there. I'd be happy to try to answer and include them along the way. So we are going to use a couple of tools in today's session. You're more than welcome to play along. There will be a couple points where I demo some things. The first section, I'm going to use just a generic LLM. You can use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever you'd like to use. Doesn't really matter, or you can just follow along with what's happening on screen. For the second part, I will give you a tool that might be new to you, it might not be. And there's a couple variations of the tool, so you can choose to use either one, but I'm going to demonstrate one of them just to show you how it works in the context of assessment here. And so without further ado, let's jump in. So what is generative AI? Well, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but you guys have all seen different examples of generative AI. Most people are familiar with the chatbots, your Geminis, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes. These are tools that are using large amounts of data, or in some cases, images too as well, or video. And they're taking that data, which could be text, video, audio, any kind of data. And what they do is they use that data with your inputs to create new things. And so when we're talking about school, oftentimes we're talking about things like kids writing essays or generating questions or maybe even generating visuals. And so it's not necessarily totally new because it's based on data that exists somewhere, whether it's on the web or from a textbook or if you provide it, that data. But generative AI is able to take all kinds of data and remix it and turn it into something new, which is pretty amazing. And some of the examples I included here on the right, I mentioned, if you joined a little bit later on the chat, or in the session here, Suno, which is down here in the corner. The link is somewhere in the chat. I can repost it. Suno's really cool. Copy the address. And this one my staff use to create songs for elementary students, behaving on buses, how to behave in hallways. So you can create your own custom songs by, typing in some text, by giving it some direction, and even giving it stylistic options. And Suno will create a song for you. People are doing that for songs for the hallway, things for like their books that they were reading in class. They're making songs. Gemini, again, of course, is a typical chat bot that most people are familiar with. Midjourney is a pretty popular AI tool as well. This allows you to generate images. And then 11 Labs is really focused on voice. They allow you to take your voice and clips of your voice and then actually use your voice to be able to create new recordings of what you would sound like, if you were actually saying something that was typed on screen. So all of them are different. And the reason I included this sort of smattering of different tools is that really there's no area of creation that isn't being untouched from AI's capabilities. So it's pretty broad reaching. So because this has such capabilities, we're under some pressure to rethink assessment in the context of education. Typically, when we talk about assessment, what does the path look like? Now, when I started teaching 15 years ago, well, 20 years ago at this point now, it was pretty straightforward. It was linear. It was like I was when I went to school, 25 years ago. You spend a bunch of time reading about stuff. You maybe go on the internet. Your teacher gives you a lecture. You gather all this information. You take a quiz. All right. You do a little bit more of that. You get some feedback, more learning. You write an essay. And then at the end, after a little bit more learning and some more feedback, you take a test. And then you just repeat the cycle, right? That's kind of how it works. And we're entering this era where if you use something like a chat GPT, it takes you, in the video on the right there, you'll see 50 seconds for me to write that essay. And I'm, typing very, very slowly, as you can see, spelling things incorrectly. And so what the thing that we need to think about is when we're talking about really powerful tools that are doing the same things that we're asking kids to do over here in this traditional assessment camp, what we really need to be thinking about is why. Why are we asking kids to write that essay when you can see ChatGPT produces an essay in the tone of a ninth grader, 5 to 6 paragraphs on mitochondria and cell structure so effectively? Why are we doing that? And this is the question. What is the value of an essay if ChatGPT can write 10 of them in 10 minutes? The cost of that, or the value of the student learning in that process, has been deflated incredibly. That's not to say that you still can't learn anything from writing an essay, because there are other steps to get there, right? But the thing that we need to keep in mind is that as these tools get better and better, when we look at the final outcome, we need to understand that the outcome, the value of that outcome, has changed dramatically because ChatGPT or Gemini or Midjourney, in the case of art, can create these things very quickly. So what do we do? Well, oftentimes what was kind of the conversation, unfortunately, I think the conversation has really turned from this. I was very worried initially because when we started seeing ChatGPT become universally available, we saw very public protests of the use of ChatGPT. A number of public schools, at least in the US, were banning it. They're outlawing it. A lot of schools have turned to these types of tools. These are going to be like your plagiarism checkers. So Qtext, Turnitin is a big one, Quillbot, using AI detection. And so there's sort of this initial like, oh my gosh, this is existential. We need to stop this stuff, do whatever we can to outlaw it, right? Okay, so the thing with this is that, one, we found that banning it is just a bad idea, because it's like, why would we ban computers for schools? Because that's going to be, computers are a part of everyone's future in some way, whether it's through work or through leisure. These are important things to use. Same thing with these plagiarism tools is AI is going to be a part of our future too. And plagiarism tools are found to be pretty widely ineffective. There's a number of meta-analysis that have already been done to suggest that they don't work well at all. And so this really isn't a good path forward. Right? So, well, what do? We need to rethink assessment. We need to rethink how we assess. And so there's a number of different people who've talked about this. And one of the people who I have found is really great in this area. One of our community members, Leon Furs. So Leon, I'll drop his name into the chat. You can check out his blog. He has a number of different writings on this. And I found his work to be really influential in terms of my thinking. But we need to be thinking about what is it we're asking students to do and what is it that we're actually assessing. So we need to be thinking about process over product. If an outcome like an essay or an outcome like a test can be responded to by an AI in 10 seconds, why are we having a child compete against a computer? What is the point of that if we're only looking at the outcome? And so where the learning really occurs is in the process. It's in the research, it's in the iteration, it's in the collaboration, it's in the thinking, it's in the brainstorming. It's in all those different components that lead up to that outcome, right? And so we really need to start thinking about how do we assess the process in a way that makes sense for the outcome that is being intended. Another component that I really like to look at is authentic learning experiences. In a test, how many times in your job, after you've passed your licensure for getting your teaching license, how many times have you had to take a test? I mean, for me, it's been, I think, literally once since I did, outside of grad school. But for my actual job, I actually haven't had to take a test. Oh, I'm sorry, I did, for trainings, some of those trainings that we have to do. But realistically, as a part of the work that we do, we very rarely take a test in the way that we're used to taking tests in school. And so what we want to think about is, what are the types of skills that we need when we leave school? What are those experiences that we have in the workplace where, we might use AI to assist us, or we might have to do some kind of collaborative activity? Why is it that we're focusing on a test, an essay, or a quiz when those are not the skills typically that we need upon leaving school? So an important piece of this puzzle, I think, too. And the last one I would mention too is personalization. AI, personalized learning is something we've been talking about for decades. And unfortunately, we've never really reached that potential. And I think part of the problem is scale. One teacher to 30 students, in a classroom is not really sustainable for a teacher to be able to personalize for every student. With AI, we have the potential to be able to do things at scale, particularly personalization, for almost every child. And so there's some potentials here across all three of these areas that we need to think about. Under personalization, I put that applies to assessment, feedback. And the other thing too that we can also think about too is self-assessment. When we think about grades, often it's like the teacher giving the student the grade, but there is the possibility or the capability that we start thinking about other ways of having students grade potentially themselves, or a combination of both teacher and student grading. And there is a particular blog from Leon that I wanted to pull up. I'll drop it in the chat here too. There you go. So you can see, what his thoughts are on that. Great. So there is a question here. How would you use personalization as a teacher to scale via LLMs? Wonderful question, because that's exactly where we're heading. So we need to reshape the way we think about or view assessment. And so this is just sort of a framework that I thought might be kind of helpful to set the stage for the next part, which is where actually we're going to get into some real use cases, right? So like, how do we actually do this? And I'll demo them too. So the one thing that I like to do is always bring AI to the table in any kind of task that I'm doing. And it takes a while to get to this point. It's not something that'll come naturally right away, but just about in any task that I perform, I try to bring AI to the table if I can. If I'm dealing with sensitive information, student grades, demographics, things like that, I don't include AI, of course. But if I'm working on a presentation, a proposal, just brainstorming, I'm going to use it in a lot of different capacities. And I've only gotten to be able to do that by integrating it into my workflow. And so in order to do that, you just have to bring it to the table. And so I always have ChatGPT open up on a tab on my computer, for better, for worse. And I often use it to help with a lot of different tasks. Shifting role of educators, as we move into this AI era, our role as educators will probably shift quite a bit, as it did with the previous era where we started to see computers come into our classrooms. The conversation around, there's a saying, sage on the stage or guide on the side, that we often have at least in the US. I don't know if that's outside the US, but the idea is that computers are capable of doing things and allowing kids to sort of diverge off the path of having to listen to a lecture every single class period. And especially with AI, you have basically the world's access of information and knowledge now, with AI being able to provide specific inference for kids. That means that our role as educators will probably shift quite a bit over time. So we got to be open to that possibility. One thing that I mentioned previously is we really want to focus on things like skills that are important for the workplace, creativity, critical, and cross-disciplinary thinking too as well. One of the things that AI is not good at is taking a problem in one situation and applying it to another, especially if there's like content expertise. So if I happen to have expertise in the area of agriculture and biology, because my job is like a biomedical whatever, or bio Peck in agriculture, the AI may be able to help me really well in one area, but I have to be able to synthesize and pull apart and say, like, this is useful here and this is not useful here. So thinking about how do we use AI in a way that allows us to use our expertise as humans most effectively. And so when we're thinking about assessment, I offer these as some examples of some ways that we kind of reshape our thinking to start looking at how do we address this problem of assessment in this AI era. Okay. So how do we leverage? Now, the question was, what do we do? How do we do this? Like, great, Mike, awesome, we got it. How do I do this in my classroom? And my hope is today that you're able to leave with some examples. So the first one, and I'm going to walk through 3 examples. The first 3 here are going to be sort of teacher focus. So I'm the teacher in the classroom, and I'm able to access ChatGPT or some kind of model like that. And I want to be able to begin personalizing my learning and rethinking assessment for students. And the 3 examples I've set up are kind of like starting point. So if you're new to this world of AI, that's totally fine. And, all 3 of these are perfectly doable. But this is like sort of step 1, kind of easy mode. So when we're talking about AI, the really cool thing that I think a lot of teachers, particularly in our school, are using AI for is customizing assessments. Your class might be filled with students who are kind of all over the spectrum in terms of their capabilities, their readiness levels, their abilities or disabilities. And so creating assessments that are appropriate for every student is really hard. Usually it's like one size fits all, but now we don't have to. Using AI, we can create differentiated assessments that meet student needs, They could also be developed very quickly to target specific learning gaps. And then the other part too that's really nice is because of how fast this is, you can rapidly iterate multiple test copies. So one of the things that in the US here, well, at least I'll speak from my district, I don't want to say the US, but we oftentimes, when we have students who have specific learning disability of some sort, they may have accommodations on the test, like maybe they only get 3 answers for multiple choice, or maybe they require more true-false questions, or they need hints for their essays. Whatever the case might be, they might need some accommodations. That can be really time-consuming, especially if you have 3 or 4 students who have different needs. And so one of the great things about using any kind of AI model now at this point is that you can upgrade your assessments very quickly. But we don't want to stop there, okay? I think it's really important to point out that, like, when we talk about AI being impactful, we want to make sure that we're thinking about not just improving what we currently do, but sort of thinking about the next wave of learning that's capable because of AI. And so, this is just sort of enhancing what we currently have in place. The next example, I think, is really, really apt or applicable if you're a classroom teacher. And like, so I'm teaching 7th grade. My baby was 7th grade world history. I loved it so much. The kids were a blast to teach at that age. And the one thing that I often found is, okay, I got this curriculum and I got maybe a set of tests and a textbook, and I was expected to teach this stuff. Now, the thing that, if you know anything about 7th graders who are 12 or 13 years old here in the US, is that they don't like to sit a lot and read a lot of tests and, do individual work. And so for me, it was really boring and excruciating. For them, it had to be the worst thing ever, to have to sit through like a traditional test. So what I used, or what I would like to use ChatGPT for if I were back in that classroom, is I would take some of those traditional tests and use it as a basis for creating additional assignments or different assignments. So instead of offering the students a test or a quiz, I might use that same test to create a collaborative project for them. Maybe come up with an idea for a presentation for the students, or perhaps even use the test as a platform to create a role play activity for kids who are really interested in, at that age, especially being dramatic and talking, the 2 of their favorite things. So the one thing that you can use this for, and I will show you again how to do all 3 of these, is the one thing that's really cool about this is that, like, as a teacher, I often didn't have a lot of time to, during the year, rethink like what it is, or come up with new assessments or new rubrics for new projects. You kind of roll with what you have, and over time you improve stuff because, time is hard to find during the school day. And so this example is one that I like quite a bit, because we're using AI to do some of that heavy lifting of thinking of a new activity and even coming up with like new kinds of scoring mechanisms too. And the last one is, and I haven't, like, honestly, I put this together as an example, but I haven't seen some great examples out there for this. So I really am interested to see like how we incorporate AI into projects where students use AI on their own. And so maybe I saw in the chat there, self-directed learning. Yeah, I think self-directed learning is wonderful, where students are able to take kind of control of their learning, express their agency, and use the tools at their disposal to be able to kind of chart their own path. And we'll look at an example of that on the next set of demos that I'll do. But I want to think about here is like, what does it look like where we sort of release some of the agency to the students? Now we have very clear learning goals still intact, but they have the ability to sort of, free flow based on their capabilities and their access to resources. So, these are things that become possible when we start thinking about AI. and its uses, especially for the teacher. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring over into this window my chat GPT. Okay, so hopefully you're not seeing that because I'm not seeing that. You come back over here. All right, we'll try this again. There it is. Okay, cool. So now you can see my chat GPT. So one of the things that so I started with was like, how do we take an assessment and just enhance that current assessment that we have in some way? So I took the liberty of actually downloading a practice test that I taught from 7th grade social studies. This was on the Mayan civilization. So I'm going to upload my PDF into ChatGPT. So you're welcome to play along on your own computer, or if you want to follow me here, that's totally fine too. But this is sort of like level 1. We're getting started with personalization here a little bit. So I've uploaded my PDF into this window, and the test that I had there was like some multiple choice. I think there's some true, false, and matching, and I think there was an essay too as well. So what I'm going to ask ChatGPT is, can you create for me a copy of the test for a student who is a struggling reader? There we go. So I'm going to say recreate for a struggling reader. Okay. So these are very vague directions, but you can see that it took the test and it started to create a set of questions. So it looks like they pared it down quite a bit. I need this to be at least 20 questions with haste. And so as far as the test goes, as you could see, I have a struggling reader, and I needed to adapt the test very quickly. So I gave it a model to look at. I asked it to recreate for me something that is going to be able to be a bit more readable for the user who is struggling. And now I have a second test. Now, again, the one thing that's really, really important here is that I need to vet all this to look at what's good and what's not, but it saved me a lot of the time of having to recreate and retype the test on my own. I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll do one more thing here. Can you create a version where the multiple choice is only 3 answers? And there we go. So now I have 3 examples of tests. As a teacher, it might take me, an hour to create a test using the resources I had from the websites I found that I used in the teaching process, from the textbook that I had available to me. So, I think there's some really great benefits to speed and scale here. And the one thing I want to point out is like, this is a great time saver for teachers. But what I want to really emphasize is that this should not be the be all end all. This is not the maximal capability of what AI can do for us. And so I want to push it a little bit further. So there's a couple questions. Test system integrated with LLMs, especially. Oh, okay. So actually, so the question came in is like, saying that like systems are limited, they don't allow for group personalization. So what's really interesting is that, we're talking about like, I'm not using any specific like educational tool. But what I can tell you is that at least in the US, testing is a very big market. There is a huge market around testing. And so AI is often being kind of pushed into different tools, where students will take a benchmark test and then it will personalize their learning based on learning targets for that grade level. And so, it's not really like a group personalization, but it's individual personalization that's done based on AI using the data it has in the background of the test that students take to be able to provide that personalized learning path. So some of that stuff is out there, just not in the form of like tools that don't involve testing, which is really something we need to figure out. So, all right, anyway. So I'm gonna bring that same test back. All right, so now the second example I gave you is like, okay, I have a curriculum, I have a test. I'm gonna go ahead and upload it here into ChatGPT, and you can just take your if you can't get a PDF into ChatGPT or whatever you're using, you can just put the text in there too as well. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, I would like to create 3 alternative assessments for this unit that don't involve students taking a test. Give me 3 possible projects and a rough overview of the assessment method. Okay, so let's see what we got. So now I gave it a test that I had, and I said, okay, let's start talking about other options. And it took the test, and it's given me 3 alternatives in 30 seconds. So it gave me a Mayan civilization diorama. Here you go. It talks about, so here it would be able to sort of look at different aspects of Mayan life, Mayan culture presentation. Okay, so here they would create a presentation they'd share with the class. So slides, poster, video, a storybook. Cool. So like, these are some interesting alternatives to the test. And so these are things that if we go back to that kind of, and I hadn't played this out before, so I didn't know what results I was going to get. But if we go back to the presentation, I had shared a little bit about the idea that we want to reframe and reshape our thinking a little bit around those skills that make us most human. And so as far as like these activities go, we now have a few different options. Let me say, for just the sake of time here, because we are moving pretty quick, I'm going to go with option 3. So can you make me a student self-assessment rubric for option 3? And here we are. So now we have ChatGPT helping us create our rubric. And just like that, I have a bunch of options. So I went from, whether it really depends on like where you're at, but I think in most places there are some sort of systems for, teacher evaluations. In our case, we use what's called Danielson's framework. So this is a framework that focuses on what kind of teaching and learning is expected in the classroom. And oftentimes we want to see, higher level, greater depth of thinking in the classroom. And so these types of activities are going to be pushing the students to think a lot deeper, to focus on skills that are more human-centered, and also to, as we talked about before, focus on things like creativity, critical thinking, and also cross-curricular learning as well too. If you want to drop your question in the chat, that'd be great. I'll try to get to it as we go here.
Mike, it looks like someone's raised their hand. They might want to ask a question as well.
Okay. Yeah. Should I take it now or wait till the end?
It's entirely up to you. Right?
I guess I could take it now.
It was Adesanloye. I hope I got that right. Did you want to ask your question?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It's been so interesting so far. My name is Adesle from Nigeria. I'm an EdTech aspiring founder. Yep. So my question was that I see like you're creating the instruction in ChatGPT. So are you printing it out on paper after you create them? And marking it out, because I just thought that you fed ChatGPT the student test scores in the beginning.
Oh no.
So, okay.
Yeah. So what I did was I fed it a blank test this was just sort of the example is I'm a teacher and I want to do something that's more creative, that's going to be pushing my students to think more critically. I'm tired of using my test. I want a new test, or I want to personalize a test. And so I used the old test that was just blank. And then ChatGPT was able to then, look at that information and infer what it is that I would like to do with it based on my prompting. So yeah, I didn't feed any student data in there.
Yeah, I was saying that when you feed it the student data, what happens is that I've been doing personalization research and we're building personalization right into the application that we're building. When you feed it, that's when the personalization happens, because now you can have each student, but if you can't feed in the data, right, you can't exactly create those personalized assessments. I'm just saying, I don't know, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So you bring up a really good point. And so I don't know if you had asked the question earlier, but it's actually a good transition into the next part of the presentation, because I do have some stuff for that. I think it's important that we point out here is that personalization in this case is we're really talking about from the teacher's view, right? We're not really thinking too much about like the student's personalization, like them having a voice in that conversation. But there are ways that we can do that. And I think Michael Harvey joined us. Michael is one of the AI leaders for sure in the teaching space. And I know he's been dropping some knowledge in there. But yeah, we're capable of building bots now, which I think are a great way for us to turn the personalization over to the students. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my presentation here. And so those are just a couple examples. Now you could continue on with ChatGPT and create all kinds of different presentations or projects based on the stuff that you have sitting around in your closets. And that's the part I think that's really great about this, is it helps kind of speed things up quite a bit. Now, what we're starting to see on the student side is a couple of use cases in particular. The first one is real-time feedback. And so you may have heard of platforms like Khan Academy. So Khan Academy is probably one of the largest ed tech companies by user base in the US. Khan Academy has videos and tutorial libraries and small assessments for students to take on subjects like math and reading in particular. And in Khan Academy, they released something called Khanmigo, which is an AI chatbot that students are able to use as sort of like a personal tutor as they work through the different exercises, whether, like I said, it's math or reading. I think there's science now too. But the purpose of that bot is to give immediate feedback, whether it's writing or if they're working on a math problem. And that feedback is very personalized. So that allows them to then iterate in terms of what they're working on. And so that's one example. We're seeing the tools kind of pop up in places where that real-time feedback is necessary for their growth. As I mentioned before, a lot of testing companies in the US are kind of going down that route of providing sort of like AI mentors in the platform. Again, I don't know that that's the best use of AI for students. I don't think a lot of students like talking to chatbots in that way. And so, that's one thing I've seen. But the other is like, what happens when students are just using ChatGPT? Can they use ChatGPT to gather feedback on their own work? So as they are working on their essay, as they are working on their project, could they not use the AI to get their own feedback? And I see there's a lot of questions kind of working in the chat there, especially around privacy, which is certainly a big conversation here. If a student is able to directly interact with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever model you're using, as long as they have permission to do so, this can be a really important use for AI in terms of personalization. And as a teacher, if I know my class is using AI, I can set clear expectations for when it's used and how it's used. And this is one use case I think that's really helpful. Personally, I use this quite a bit in my own workflow. The other use case that I think is pretty interesting is teacher-trained AI chatbots. So, for many of you, if you've used ChatGPT, your Claude or something else, these models have a lot of utility as an individual, but there are nice ways that you can actually train bots. I'll call it train. So you're able to kind of provide them sort of some guardrails and create custom bots, and those bots are able to do specific things really well. And so you might be able to, as a teacher, create bots that are used for brainstorming. Perhaps they're used for networking. Perhaps they're used for mentoring of some sort, or maybe even providing feedback. And when we are able to create these custom bots, it's almost like you're able to create your own ed tech tools. And so not only are these like really, really useful, because as a teacher, I know my students best and like what they need in the context of this particular class. And so maybe my students need a bot that really helps them out with working on this particular physics problem because it's very, very challenging. Or maybe they need a bot for writing support because they're new writers, or they're maybe English language learners and they need that support. So can I create a bot that helps support them specifically with their challenges? And so that data, that information, that support they're getting is really personalized because they're able to interact directly with the bot rather than me using the bot to say, oh, this is what you need. So we're actually giving them a bit of agency here. So I'd like to kind of look at this as like a use case. And I think it's really important too, especially a lot of people have picked up on this and the idea that privacy is really, really important here. And so I'm going to show you a couple tools that I use in order to create these bots. But you do need to check with, certainly your audience in terms of who you're working with, and also like, who and what their capabilities are to use these tools. And so I'm going to show you a couple tools. So I'm going to pop out of this one. There are two that I really, really like to use to create these bots. We have a community member who created Chip AI, which is it's a tool that uses or allows you to create your own personal chatbots. It uses ChatGPT as kind of the engine, and then allows you to create kind of a custom bot that does specific things. The other one that I really like is Poe. And here in Poe, you can see I've logged in already. This is a couple of the bots that I use for my teachers. So I created a bot that helps them actually work on creating better assessments. This is a brainstormer for lesson ideas. And so, creating custom bots is a way that you can help sort of provide support for, whatever the specific topic is you'd like to in your context. So either one they're both very usable and they're both free to start, which is really nice. So I'm going to start with Chip just because the process to set up a new bot is pretty easy. And so you can see some of the applications that I've created before. The Skill Path Navigator is actually a bot that helps students kind of chart their career path, and then also connects them directly with resources online that they can use to learn more about the jobs that they might be interested in. So that was just one example I used before. So in order to create a new app here in Chip, you do have to log in. So I just logged in with my school Google account here. So you'll see my green knight loaded up. And once I'm logged in, I'm going to go to create. And I'm going to stick with my Mayan civilization. Oop, let me get rid of new application. There you go. Mayan chatbot. Okay. So the description of this bot is, we're going to say this bot will help design a Mayan project. Okay. So again, we don't want to have a test. We want to move away from the test. We want to start working towards a project. So you are a helpful assistant that is going to help 7th grade learners come up with a unit project that captures important elements about the Mayan civilization. Okay, so some poor spelling, but I think we'll get away with it. That contains, okay, cool. In the process, you need to help them devise a project and a scoring, a self-assessment. We'll do self-assessment scoring system. Okay, cool. Here you can also, actually they just allowed us to switch models, but that is pro version, never mind. But I will use ChatGPT 4 for this. So there are a couple of other things you can do, like those sentence starters. So that's like what you see when you jump on to ChatGPT. It also gives the options to like upload files. So you can turn them on and off. I'm just gonna leave it go for now. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit share. So now I have this new bot created. So let me open up a new window. And I'm going to start, forgot Chatbo, forgot the T. But if we go ahead and take a look here, so, all right. Okay. So here it's giving me some different projects or an outline for projects. And it gives me a lot of different ideas. Okay. Maybe this is more than you want to give them. So I might have to go back to prompting a little bit more clearly because we have a whole bunch of different things here. It actually gave me a lot of information. I don't like those projects in typical 7th grade fashion. There you go. Here we go. Some other ideas. Ooh, love this one. Mayan cooking show. That's awesome. Mayan cooking show sounds great. Okay. So here we go. Now it's giving me a plan to help create the show. So you can see just how quickly, and I know in the essence of time, like I don't want to spend a whole lot more time here, but I could ask it to make me a rubric that outlines these 20 points. It gives me a whole schedule for my show. And this is, the bot took me literally 10 seconds. And so, yeah, KS Lewis said in the chat there, making bots is very easy. It really is, with a couple of tools. And I will drop both of those. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that before. I'll drop both of those links in the chat. So here's Poe. This is the other one that I've used. And the first one is, let me get to, I think I just want to get the clean link. There it is, Chip AI. And like I said, both are free, which makes them very useful to use. Now, again, you're using ChatGPT as sort of the base model, but you do want to be thinking about the age of the students you're working with. Generally, at least here in the US, under 13 is kind of a no-fly zone with these types of tools, unless you have parent permission. And a lot of schools, they're talking about getting parent permission to use these tools. We are kind of in that process ourselves personally, or at my school district. So, but building these chatbots is a great way to, as we were talking about before, move away from like the teacher directed towards the student directed, student agency version of the future. And so these are just some examples that I've seen, I've used in different contexts. And some ways that we can start rethinking assessment in the context of K-12 education. So here's my career pathway builder. You'll just see kind of the process. Basically, I prompted the bot to come up with a set of questions. So I had to ask them about interests and passions. Great question. So KS Lewis just said, I have an online course running, so could I add the bot to it by sharing a link? Yeah, there's a link that whether you use Chip or Poe, they both provide you a shareable link. So what does the prompt look like for tutoring bots as working through high stakes exams and the questions? I mean, that would be something I don't know the answer to. There's probably going to be local, guidance on that, what your school, what they would say about whether or not students can use that. Yeah, I don't know about, especially for high stakes testing, and challenging questions. Yeah, that might be something you need to talk with like your school administration about. But certainly in the context of the classroom and a typical teacher may have some autonomy to be able to like use either the teacher focused examples we had today, or even start diving into this chatbot world that we were talking about. So I know we're running short on time here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I know Kim wants to jump back on for a moment here, but just to kind of recap, and I know we moved kind of quickly through some of the examples. I hope we kind of walked through that slow enough that it resonated, kind of landed for you. I wanted people to be able to leave with some actionable items from this session. And so just as some big takeaways, high levels, really AI is a big, there's a big potential for AI to help us move towards personalization, but we can't use AI to just enhance or speed up or make more efficient really bad teaching practices. And the reality is that, writing essays and taking multiple choice quests or tests and quizzes, like these things are not most useful for our students' future because that's not what we do in our work today. And so we need to be approaching assessment by reshaping what we really focus on and focusing on those things that make us, special as humans, not competing with machines. And the last thing that I really emphasize is get out and play. I wanted to give everybody a couple tools. Hopefully Poe and Chip are maybe new to you, maybe not, but hopefully you left with some different ideas or tools that you can play with to be able to explore the capabilities more. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Feel free to push yourself, and it's okay to make mistakes. And so this is just some final takeaways for this meeting here. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kim. I know you want to jump back on.
No worries. Thank you so much, Mike, for that awesome presentation. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. It's really great to have, you all turn up and to engage as well, like asking some really great questions. This is such an important topic, and it's something that we should be learning together and uplifting each other. So I really appreciate all your time. I've popped the link into the chat for a survey. We'd love to hear your feedback, but you can also scan the QR code here. Your feedback really does help us to improve these workshops and to make sure that we're providing value for you as educators. So once again, thank you, Mike, so much for that presentation. We do have some more workshops coming up with Dr. Mike Peck, which should be amazing. And yeah, I'm sure we will make this recording available online as well. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you soon.